The studio lights blazed hot as the moderator barely finished the introduction. Cameras zoomed in on Denzel Washington, seated firmly across from Donald Trump. There was no warm-up, no polite small talk. Denzel leaned forward, his voice sharp and deliberate. "Your empire," he said, each word landing like a hammer, "is nothing but lies." The room fell into a tense silence. Trump's expression froze for a fraction of a second, then his jaw tightened. Viewers at home could feel the air shift. This wasn't another routine panel. It was a direct confrontation, and it came with fire. Trump attempted to laugh it off. "Another Hollywood actor who thinks he's a politician," he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. But the crowd didn't laugh. Instead, all eyes locked on Denzel, whose calm, steely gaze didn't waver. "This isn't about acting, Mr. Trump," he continued, his tone steady but cutting, "it's about truth. You built towers on debt, casinos on broken promises, and a presidency on deception. And you expect Americans to keep believing you?" The moderator tried to interject, but the roar of the audience drowned him out. Some gasped, some applauded, others leaned forward as if bracing for impact. Trump's face reddened. "That's nonsense," he snapped, raising his voice. "I built the greatest businesses, the strongest brand, and I led this country better than anyone else. Everyone knows it." Denzel didn't blink. "Led this country? You misled it. Every skyscraper you claim as proof is stained with lawsuits. Every deal you brag about left someone cheated. And when it came to the presidency, you didn't strengthen the office, you weakened it." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only when murmurs rippled through the crowd like a wave. It was only the first minute, and already, the stage felt like it might explode. Trump leaned forward, stabbing a finger across the table as though he could puncture Denzel's words with sheer force. "You don't know a thing about building, Denzel. You don't know the blood, sweat, and genius it takes to create an empire like mine. You're an actor. You read scripts. I built reality." His voice echoed, defensive yet desperate, as the audience's reaction split into boos and scattered applause. Denzel's reply was calm, almost surgical. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. "Reality," he repeated slowly, letting the word linger. "Reality is the contractors you stiffed, the families you left unpaid, the veterans you mocked when they begged for jobs, the students you scammed with your so-called university. That's not reality, it's fraud dressed in gold letters." The crowd erupted. Some clapped furiously, others shouted, "Let him answer," but no one could deny the weight of the accusation. Trump's face tightened into a scowl, but his usual comeback suddenly felt shallow. He reached for his rehearsed lines, but Denzel cut him off like a blade. "America didn't elect you to build another Trump Tower," Denzel continued, his tone sharpening. "They wanted a leader. And instead, you gave them walls of glass and mirrors. Nothing solid. Nothing lasting. Just lies polished until they shined." Trump slammed his hand on the table, the microphones catching the thud. "You don't talk to me like that. You think you're the voice of America? You're just another Hollywood elitist trying to tell hard-working people what to believe. My empire is proof of success, ask anyone." Denzel didn't flinch. His eyes burned straight into Trump's. "Proof," he said coldly. "Proof is when people trust you even when the lights are off, when the cameras stop rolling. Your proof. It's a trail of lawsuits, broken promises, and Americans who paid the price for your ambition." The audience gasped, many nodding, some whispering. The tension was no longer confined to the studio, it was spilling through every television screen, every phone streaming the showdown. For the first time, Trump's empire of words seemed smaller, weaker, and dangerously fragile. Trump leaned back in his chair, forcing a smirk that couldn't hide the cracks forming beneath it. "You talk a big game, Denzel," he sneered, "but you've never signed the front of a paycheck. You've never carried the weight of an empire on your shoulders. You make movies, pretend stories. I make history." He emphasized the word history as though it would erase the sting of what had just been said. Denzel tilted his head slightly, almost pitying, before delivering his counter. History? You call that history? History remembers leaders who lift their people, not ones who bury them in debt. History honors sacrifice, not greed. You keep shouting about paychecks, but every builder, every worker who ever dealt with you has the same story: they were used, underpaid, or tossed aside. That's not history, Trump. That's exploitation in a suit. The studio broke into applause so loud the moderator tried to call for order, but no one cared. Trump's face flushed as he raised his voice to overpower the noise. Those people were failures. They couldn't keep up with my standards, and they want to blame me for their laziness. You think America wants to hear the whining of losers? No. They want winners, and I'm the biggest winner of them all. That last line drew a chorus of boos mixed with awkward laughter. Denzel leaned forward now, his calm demeanor cracking just enough to reveal the fire underneath. A winner, he shot back. Winners don't need to call themselves winners, Donald. They let their actions speak. But your actions? They scream louder than any words. A winner doesn't sue veterans for small business contracts. A winner doesn't brag about dodging taxes while Americans scrape by. A winner doesn't tear this country apart just to see his name in headlines. Trump opened his mouth to cut in, but Denzel raised his voice for the first time, and the room fell silent. You don't build America by tearing Americans down. You build it by lifting them up. And that's something you've never understood, because you never wanted to. The silence was deafening. The crowd leaned forward, the air electric, as if everyone knew they had just witnessed a blow that even Trump's sharpest tongue couldn't deflect. Trump slammed his hand on the armrest, the microphone catching the dull thud. You think you're some kind of saint, Denzel? You think you've got the moral high ground because you read lines someone else wrote? Let me tell you something, you wouldn't last a day in my world. Not one. His voice had risen to a shout, the veins in his neck straining as he leaned forward, fingers stabbing the air. But Denzel didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Instead, he gave a quiet laugh that cut sharper than any insult. Your world, he said slowly, almost savoring the words. That world of lawyers, loopholes, and lawsuits? That's not a world, it's a circus. And you're the ringmaster, selling the illusion of greatness while everything behind the curtain is falling apart. Gasps rippled through the audience, and some even began clapping mid-sentence. Trump turned toward the crowd, desperate to reel them back. Falling apart? Look around you. Towers with my name on them, golf courses, hotels, money, more than you could dream of. Denzel's eyes narrowed. Towers? Buildings? That's your idea of greatness? You think slapping your name on glass and steel makes you a leader? Let me ask you something, Donald. When was the last time you built people up instead of buildings? When was the last time you lifted someone who wasn't already kneeling at your feet? The moderator tried to interject, but the audience erupted, some cheering, some shouting over each other. The clash of voices made the studio feel more like an arena. Trump raised his hand to silence them, his tone growing darker. I've built America's brand. I've made it strong. Without me, none of this works. People want a fighter, not some lecture from a Hollywood actor pretending to know the real world. Denzel leaned forward, his voice now carrying the weight of finality. You keep confusing fame with respect, Donald. You can bully contractors, you can shout down reporters, you can twist words until they're unrecognizable, but you can't bully truth. And the truth is simple: your empire, your so-called legacy, is nothing but lies stacked higher than your towers. A hush swept over the crowd. Even Trump sat back for a moment, caught off guard by the calm certainty in Denzel's delivery. Then, as though to mask the sting, Trump muttered, "We'll see who's laughing in November." The line fell flat. The room wasn't laughing with him. It was hanging on Denzel. The studio was vibrating with tension as Trump leaned back, smirking, trying to dismiss Denzel's words as nothing but Hollywood drama. He waved his hand toward the cameras, as if to tell the viewers, "Don't believe this actor, he's just here for the spotlight. But Denzel didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice dropping into that sharp, deliberate tone that carried more weight than any insult. "You keep calling this Hollywood," Denzel said, his eyes narrowing. "But let me remind you, this isn't fiction, Donald. This is your record, your deals, your so-called empire. And when people look closer, all they find are broken contracts, unpaid workers, and families who lost everything while you padded your own pockets. You call it success, I call it betrayal." The audience erupted, some clapping, some gasping. Trump's grin cracked, and he slammed his hand on the desk. "That's a lie," he barked, his voice rising. "Nobody has built more than me. Nobody has fought harder than me. People should be grateful, not questioning me." But Denzel was already over him, his words hitting harder than Trump's shouting. "You want gratitude? Try giving it first. You demand loyalty from everyone, but when it's your turn to stand tall, you shrink. Leaders don't hide behind money. Leaders don't use lies as bricks to build castles that crumble the second truth touches them." A silence washed over the crowd for just a second, and then the studio exploded. The audience was standing now, some chanting Denzel's name, others shaking their heads at Trump's red-faced rage. For the first time, it wasn't Trump controlling the narrative, it was Denzel holding the room hostage with nothing but truth and conviction. Trump tried to fight back, raising his voice above the roar of the crowd. "You think you can sit here and lecture me about loyalty and leadership? You're an actor, Denzel. You read lines someone else writes for you. I built towers, I built a brand, I built a presidency." His words came out like bullets, sharp and fast, but the anger behind them made his voice crack. Denzel didn't blink. He let Trump finish, then calmly leaned into the mic. "That's the problem, Donald. You built towers, but you didn't build trust. You built a brand, but you destroyed credibility. You built a presidency, but you tore apart the very soul of this nation." The room froze again. It wasn't just the audience this time, even the cameras seemed to lock on Denzel's face. His delivery wasn't about theatrics, it was about conviction. He spoke like a man who had nothing to lose, a man who had seen too many leaders betray their people to let another slip by unchallenged. Trump's hand gripped the desk so tight his knuckles turned white. "Fake news," he muttered, almost under his breath, then louder, "You're twisting the truth. Nobody's done more for this country than me, nobody." Denzel shot back instantly, his voice cutting like a blade. "If doing more means leaving behind chaos, debt, and division, then yes, you've done more than anyone. But history doesn't care about excuses. It cares about impact. And your impact, Donald, has been poison." The audience gasped so loudly it felt like the air had been sucked out of the studio. Trump's face went pale, then flushed red, caught between denial and fury. And Denzel? He sat back, his presence towering larger than any skyscraper Trump could boast of. The moment was clear, Trump was unraveling, and Denzel wasn't finished yet. Trump tried to laugh it off, forcing a smirk that looked more like a grimace. "Poison? You're calling me poison? This country was stronger than ever under my watch. Lowest unemployment, booming markets, the military respected again. And you sit there, pretending to be the voice of America? You're Hollywood. You're fake." The words landed, but they didn't shake Denzel. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes locked on Trump, and his calm tone carried more weight than any shout. "Donald, strength isn't measured in stock tickers or applause from your rallies. Real strength is what ordinary people feel when they wake up in the morning. Did they feel safe? Did they feel seen? Did they believe their future was brighter? Under you, too many Americans felt abandoned. And you can't buy or bully your way out of that truth." A ripple of applause broke out in the audience, hesitant at first, then growing louder, bolder. Trump snapped toward them, pointing a finger. "You don't get it. They loved me, they still love me. That's why they chant my name. That's why I filled stadiums. Denzel didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, his expression almost pitying. Crowds chanting your name don't mean they trust you. It just means they were entertained. But this country doesn't need a showman, it needs a leader. And Donald, you never understood the difference. The room erupted, this time in thunderous applause and shouts. Trump's face stiffened, his jaw locked tight, but the cameras caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time, it wasn't just Denzel confronting him, it was the truth echoing in the voices of the people watching. Trump raised his hand, trying to silence the noise, his voice climbing in desperation. You talk about leadership like you know it, Denzel. But let me tell you, nobody has sacrificed more for this country than me. I gave up my empire, my privacy, my comfort, all to sit in that Oval Office and fix what was broken. Denzel leaned back, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. You didn't sacrifice, Donald, you gambled. You saw the presidency as another business deal. Another stage. Another chance to make everything about you. And when it mattered most, when the pandemic hit, when the nation begged for clarity, you played politics. You mocked masks, you downplayed the threat, and Americans paid the price. The air thickened. Even Trump's supporters in the audience shifted uneasily. Trump slammed the desk with his palm, his voice cracking with rage. I saved lives. I closed borders. I moved faster than anyone else would have. But Denzel cut him off with a sharp edge in his tone, his words slicing through the clamor. You closed doors to save face, not lives. You bragged about numbers, about ratings, about being on TV more than Dr. Fauci. But here's the truth, Donald, while you obsessed over your image, Americans were burying their loved ones. That is not leadership. That is negligence. Gasps filled the studio. Trump blinked rapidly, searching for a retort, but for once, nothing came. Denzel pressed on, his voice lower now, almost intimate, but deadly precise. And tonight, in front of every camera, every viewer, I'll say what so many are too afraid to: your empire wasn't built to serve America. It was built to serve Donald J. Trump, and that's why it crumbled when the weight of reality hit it. The crowd roared, not with laughter this time, but with raw, furious energy. Trump sat frozen, chest heaving, unable to mask the storm that had finally caught up to him. Trump finally leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles whitened. His face flushed, his words spat like fire. You think you're some kind of prophet, Denzel? You sit here, acting righteous, but you've never had to deal with the pressure of leading a nation. You've never sat in that chair, never carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. The audience stiffened, waiting for Denzel's reply. He didn't rush. He paused, letting the tension coil tighter and tighter. Then, in a steady voice that cut through the noise, he answered. You're right, Donald. I've never sat in that chair. But leadership isn't about sitting in a chair, it's about rising when the nation falls. And you failed to rise. You hid behind excuses, behind distractions, behind lies. Trump pointed a finger at him, jabbing it like a weapon. That's your opinion, Hollywood boy. You don't know politics, you don't know sacrifice. Denzel's laugh was short, bitter, echoing across the room. Hollywood boy? Let me remind you of something. While you were firing people on reality TV, I was building a legacy of stories that gave people hope, that reflected truth, that exposed injustice. I didn't need a title to lead, I earned trust. You, on the other hand, needed the presidency to pretend you were more than a brand. And even then, you couldn't keep it together. The audience erupted, some shouting in support of Denzel, others in blind defense of Trump. The clash of cheers and boos thundered through the studio. Trump raised his voice above the chaos. I made America strong again. Denzel shot back instantly, his tone like a hammer striking steel. No, you made America a spectacle. You turned this country into your stage, and when the curtain fell, all we saw was a man scrambling to protect his ego, not his people. Trump's jaw tightened, but he couldn't stop the wave of murmurs, the truth spreading like wildfire through the crowd. The moderator's voice was drowned out by the noise. He tried to restore order, but the storm between Trump and Denzel had already swallowed the studio. Trump stood now, pacing, his face a mask of anger. You don't know what you're talking about. I gave jobs, I rebuilt strength, I fought enemies this country forgot how to fight. His hands cut the air as if he was sculpting his own version of truth. Denzel remained seated, his calm composure a sharp contrast to Trump's fury. He leaned into the mic, his voice quiet but razor-sharp. Jobs? You cheated builders out of millions. Strength? You mocked veterans, insulted allies, and embraced dictators. Fought enemies? The only enemy you fought was accountability, and you lost. The audience gasped. A woman in the front row clapped, breaking the silence, and soon applause rippled across the room. Trump's face reddened further, but he pressed on, shouting over the clamor. You're twisting everything. You're an actor, you're trained to fake emotions, to spin stories. Denzel cut him off, his tone volcanic yet controlled. And yet even as an actor, I can't match the performance you gave America. You didn't lead, you performed. Every tweet, every rally, every headline, it was theater. But here's the truth, when the cameras cut, when the lights went out, America was left with division, debt, and shame. The crowd roared, a mix of cheers and outrage, but it was clear Denzel's words had struck deep. Trump slammed his hand on the desk, rattling his water glass. You think you can define me? You think you can erase what I did? Denzel rose slowly now, his presence commanding. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. I don't need to define you, Donald. Your record defines itself. History is already writing your chapter, and trust me, it's not the story of a leader. It's the cautionary tale of a man who mistook power for purpose. The studio exploded, half standing ovation, half chaos. Trump tried to speak, but his voice was swallowed by the roar. The camera zoomed in on Denzel's unwavering expression, etched with resolve, while Trump's fury burned unchecked. It was more than a debate, it was a reckoning. Tonight wasn't just another debate, it was an unmasking. When power is built on lies, eventually the truth comes crashing in. And Denzel made sure the world saw it with their own eyes. This wasn't about applause or headlines, it was about accountability. History will remember moments like this, not because of the noise, but because one man had the courage to say what millions felt but were never heard. The empire of lies may shout, but truth doesn't need volume. It needs conviction.